In this video, we'll give you the top waiver wire players to target heading into week 9, along with our top reactions to week 8. I'm Jim Coventry, joined by Anthony Cervino of RotoWire. Anthony, let's start out some waivers here. Quarterback Jameis Winston steps in, immediately makes the Browns look like they have a real NFL offense, which they haven't had in a long time. Winston shreds the Ravens for 334, 3 touchdowns. Now, 2 corners are out. Baltimore's not a good pass defense. I don't care. Deshaun Watson wouldn't have done that. Winston is automatically a great super flex option. But, Anthony, he might have streaming option availability in single quarterback leagues. Thoughts?
I like Jameis Winston a lot, and we saw a little bit of a spark in sporadic duty last week, and this offense came alive this week. He got all of his receivers involved, and I get Baltimore. They're an easy defense when it comes to like fantasy production and overall production allowed by quarterbacks in the passing offense. But this is Jameis Winston, his first real start of the year, doing what he was able to do yesterday. To me, I don't know if it's too late for a playoff run for Cleveland, but from a fantasy football perspective, he is a must-add quarterback, and I think he can be used in a lot of spots in single quarterback leagues.
Yeah, definitely. Now, Jameis Winston, he did throw what should have been a game losing interception. Kyle Hamilton threw it right to him. Hamilton stumbled and dropped it. But hey, that's the deal with Winston. Sometimes he makes his own fortune. If he throws interceptions, he's got to do more on the other end to pick it back up. So again, wheels up. I'm going to keep throwing his name out there. He doesn't have a job right now. But Joe Flacco should be a speculative ad, especially these competitive quarterback leagues where you really got to have one if he's on the wire. Anthony Richardson goes 10 of 32 against the Texans. He had been just flirting with 50%. This was closer to a 35% passing performance. I have to think the Colts somehow have to consider making a change. Thoughts?
Yeah, on top of that, Richardson pulled himself out of the game. It seemed like he was a little bit winded. Like, these are some red flags here for me. And what's saving Anthony Richardson now is that somehow the Colts are in the mix. If they were in Cleveland's position in terms of win-loss record, maybe we do see a quarterback change. But as long as they keep finding ways to win, then I think Anthony Richardson is going to continue to be the guy. And I don't like him in fantasy. I don't think we can use him in fantasy. He has another nice matchup upcoming against Minnesota. But outside of week 1, where he scored 30 points for fantasy, he hasn't given us more than 17.
I mean, the Colts are 4-4. How many games did Flacco win for them? Did Flacco win 2 of those games for him? I don't even remember.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's almost like, Richardson wouldn't have him in it. That's very interesting. All right, let's continue on.
I was going to say, Steichen, he does not get the credit he deserves what he's doing with these quarterbacks he's had in the past 2 years.
There's no question. All right, if Jordan Love misses time with a groin injury, he didn't finish the game yesterday, Malik Willis has to be considered. 2 starts this season, 14.2 fantasy points, and then a 27.4. We know the coaching level of Matt LaFleur. We know that Willis will run. We know that he has had 2 good games. One was really good. One was good enough. If you need an emergency start and Love misses, Willis could be a short-term ad. Anthony?
Yeah, he's not the Malik Willis we remember in Tennessee. LaFleur did a terrific job. And remember those initial games where he had to step in? He was only with the team and with this playbook for a short period. I think he was cut like a week before the season started. Now he's a little bit more acclimated. He has some experience. And again, Detroit, you've got to use him this week. They're an easy matchup for quarterbacks. I think what's going to help here is Hutchinson not being there. That's one less pass rusher in his face. This could be a nice spot for Malik Willis.
We'll do one running back. The running back landscape is kind of static right now. Kamani Vidal handles 6 carries as the backup to Dobbins. He is way in second place. Gus Edwards is on IR. He wasn't playing well before. If Dobbins were to miss time, Vidal is a speculative ad. Anthony?
Yeah, this is Dobbins' backfield. At least when Gus Edwards, at least early this year, they were on like almost a 50-50 split. Those touches were diminishing for Edwards, and now we're seeing that with Vidal. He's getting a few touches here and there, but not enough to give him standalone value in fantasy. He's a pure handcuff to a volume running back.
I will make one more running back idea. he's not good. This is a scrape the barrel thing, but we know that Kendre Miller left with a hamstring injury yesterday. Imagine that. So Jamal Williams, again, just like Vidal, is going to be so far the second fiddle, in this case, to Alvin Kamara. But again, if Kamara were to get dinged and miss time, and if Miller's still out, then Jamal Williams could have some volume that would help in a really deep league. Anthony?
Yeah, again, if you have a deep enough bench where you can roster somebody like Jamal Williams, I say pick him up. Otherwise, if you're shallow 5-6 man bench, I don't know if you can do it. I get again another handcuff play here if Kamara misses time, but even if he did, what is Jamal Williams really going to give us?
Like I said, it's a scrape the barrel.
Yeah.
You're in bye week heck and you have injuries. Yeah, it may just be a person to plug in. But again, if you're the number 2, like we were saying, you got some value. It's just you don't want to start the guy, but sometimes you just have to do it. All right, wide receivers. We're going to talk about all 3 Cleveland receivers here because they deserve to be spoken about here, because under the disaster with Deshaun Watson, they were not good at all. And we'll start with Cedric Tillman, at least 81 yards in 2 games. He's the downfield threat of these 3 receivers, and Jameis Winston will throw the ball downfield. Again, Tillman took advantage of a Baltimore defense. No Marlon Humphrey, no Nate Wiggins. Doesn't matter. He goes 99 yards and 2 touchdowns. Right now, Cedric Tillman in this offense, he could be as high as a top 30 receiver going forward. Anthony?
Yeah, this is now consecutive weeks for Cedric Tillman, where he had 12 and 9 targets, 881 against Cincy, 7 for 99 and a pair of scores this week, a minimum of 16 PPR points in these 2 games. Now, this upcoming matchup against the Chargers, I don't love it, but here's the but here. It's not just Tillman, right? Like, can the Chargers really contain Judy, Tillman, Elijah Moore? Collectively, this is a nice wide receiver room for Jameis Winston. So Cedric Tillman would be my priority add, but I would also take a look at Elijah Moore and
we're going to go through each one. Yeah, we'll go through each one. Yeah. So next is Jerry Jeudy. Now, we'll get to Moore in a minute. Moore has more targets than Jeudy, but Judy's on the field all the time. Jeudy in the last 3 games, 91%, 95, and 97. He's a full-time player. Now, people may have dropped him because in the last 3 games, 1 catch in each game, and 16, 18, and 35 yards. So Jeudy may have easily been dropped. But then he comes in yesterday, 8 targets, goes 5 for 79. He plays outside. He kicks into the slot when Tillman's on the field, which is often. And again, they're going to pass enough. I think Chubb's going to become a bigger factor in the run game, but they're going to have to throw some games. Thoughts on Jerry Jeudy?
Yeah, despite the lack of volume and the lack of production, he's still getting the offensive snap. So he's still going to be on the field. And I think we see Jameis Winston with these secondary options. How much work did he really have with Jerry Jeudy? I think this is a rapport that's going to have to develop. But once it does, Jerry Jeudy is an explosive player, and Cleveland likes him. I mean, he was fairly productive with Deshaun Watson a little bit earlier this season. So I like Jeudy, but he would be my number 2 here.
And then Elijah Moore. He's playing about 70% of the snaps, but in the last 2 games, he has 7 and 12 targets. He, in the last 2 weeks, has outperformed Jeudy. But like we're both saying, first of all, we think Judy's a better player. Judy's on the field more. Eventually, being on the field more probably leads to more looks, but there's no guarantee of that. Thoughts on Elijah Moore?
Solid option. Elijah Moore, if you remember, he popped his rookie year with the Jets, and he hasn't really ever been the same, but we've seen this talent flash before. Anybody getting this type of volume, like, 6 targets against Cincy, but 12 last week, is there a middle? If the middle is 8, and you could tell me, okay, Elijah Moore is going to give you 8 targets a week, that's enough volume for me to add him and even use him in a flex spot.
Jalen McMillan of the Buccaneers is next. 7 targets against the Falcons. Sterling Shepard was knocked out for a brief period of time. He came back in, but McMillan only gets 35 yards despite 7 targets. What I'm worried about McMillan is when he's on the outside, as long as Mike Evans out, he's going to see a top corner. And I don't know how much of top corners he's going to be able to beat, but the Buccaneers defense is terrible. They're going to have to pass, and McMillan's going to see targets. And I say it every show, volume's king in fantasy football. Anything on McMillan?
Yeah, I was really high on McMillan this upcoming week. I thought it was a really nice spot for Atlanta. He got the volume. He just didn't get enough production. Maybe he just needs to get a little bit more acclimated with Baker Mayfield, because against Baltimore, after those two receivers were knocked out, he also had 8 targets, but only 3 for 15. I think this is more of a rapport thing. He's still my favorite wide receiver on that football team right now.
The next one, this would be a tough ad. These are getting pretty deep now. Jalen Coker, 78 yards and touchdown. It was a garbage time touchdown. Game was long over. Denver kind of checked out. They were in a blowout victory. Coker gets 78 yards and a touchdown. That said, Coker had a little production. Now, Deontay Johnson was out. That certainly helped the target volume. But it looks, there's a chance Deontay Johnson gets traded. There's a chance that Coker definitely passed up for the number 3, Mingo, for the number 3 spot. So he'll be on the field some. But again, the quarterback play isn't very good. So I think he could be a good player, but the offense around him is not good. And I don't know how many receivers they can support, but anything on Coker.
Coker could be a nice stash. And the big if they trade Deontay Johnson, that opens up a little bit more playing time. If Andy Dalton comes back, because with Bryce Young under center, there's not a lot here for me to like on Coker. Again, he had a nice solid production yesterday, but that was all garbage time.
Continuing with the deep league stashes, Kayshon Boutte continues to see heavy snaps, like 85% per game. This time against the Jets, 6 targets, 3 for 46. Again, not much production. The passing game is low volume, not doing a lot. But again, he's on the field. It could get a little better as the season goes on. Anything here?
Depends on who the quarterback is. I know Drake May got knocked out of the game with the concussion. If it's Drake May, he doesn't miss time. I do like Kayshon Boutte. Otherwise, I don't know if there's enough here to add him with Jacoby Brissett. At least add him and use him this week. They got Tennessee. That's going to be a rough spot.
I do want to bring up Parker Washington of the Jaguars. Last year, he had that one game which nobody started him because Kirk started. Had that injury like a few plays into the game. Parker Washington goes out. Then he does nothing the rest of the season. But Christian Kirk's out for the season, broke a collarbone. And we don't know the status. Brian Thomas and Gabe Davis both left the game with injuries. So I don't know what their receiver room is going to look like next week. But I know there's one opening. And I know Parker Washington is a direct replacement for the slot. Christian Kirk wasn't doing very much, though. That's the rub. So if one of the other receivers misses time, Gabe Davis or Brian Thomas, Washington for a week or however long other players are out could get into some volume. Anything here?
Yeah, he's certainly worth picking up because of this offense. And there is value in that slot position, despite the fact that Christian Kirk hasn't done much. Parker Washington, 4 targets, 3 for 46. So he was money with the opportunities he had yesterday. So I do think I would prioritize adding him over, certainly over Boutte that we just talked about. I like this spot for Parker Washington.
Yeah, 100% on that. And then a possible 1 week stash, or not stash, a 1 week emergency start who could get you a 0, but he could do something. John Mechie, 4 targets for the Texans. Nico Collins is going to miss 1 more week. They expect him back in week 10. Stephon Diggs leaves with a knee injury, non-contact injury. Don't know if he is going to miss. And then realistically, they just have Tank Dell. John Mechie could be busy in week 9. That could turn into nothing, but if you're desperate, it might be a dart throw. Anthony?
Mechie coming in had a lot of hype. He had those, the personal issues, the injuries he was dealing with. I think he's a good player. He just needs an opportunity. There's not a lot of other guys here. Like, this isn't a deep wide receiver room. It's very top heavy. Diggs non-contact injury, that could be significant. So if you need a spot play and Diggs isn't there, and maybe even if Diggs is there, I don't mind Mechie at all. I get it's a tough matchup this week against the Jets, but this Jets defense, their secondary has not looked right.
Tight ends. Hunter Henry has 3 good games in a row. Not earth-shattering, but good games. At the tight end position, he might be rostered in a lot of leagues. But if you need a tight end streamer, usually around that tight end 12 mark, it's normally kind of dicey. Hunter Henry, especially when Drake May's playing, he belongs. Anything?
Yeah, Henry is a player I feel like should be rostered in more spots than he is, but he isn't. Now, he has a lot of volatility since he's been with the Patriots, but that volatility has to do with their quarterback room. With Drake May, we've seen some consistency out of Hunter Henry, and he's heavily leaned on. So I think Hunter Henry certainly should be added if you need a tight end in fantasy. I don't think it's a question.
After missing 3 games in a row, Taysom Hill may have been dropped. If he was, he had 4 carries, 4 targets, and 1 pass attempt last week. Again, if he qualifies to tight end, and you know they will use him at the goal line if they get there at times, he will be part of that. So again, Taysom Hill, somebody to consider a tight end. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a banged up Saints team. There is no more like the versatility of Shaheed. That could potentially, now obviously Taysom Hill doesn't have that speed, but he's a versatile player. They like to use these versatile players all over the formation. This is what Taysom Hill does best. No Kendre Miller. I think that could open up some snaps behind Kamara as well. As long as he's a tight end, like you said, Taysom Hill has value in fantasy football.
There's no doubt. Zach Ertz, high weekly floor, at least 8.8 PPR points in 4 of the last 6 games. He had his best game yesterday, like 7 for 77, something like that. Usually there's not much of a ceiling, but there is a good floor every week.
Yeah, Ertz is another player. It's taking him a little bit to come on, but we are starting to see some production out of Ertz. 3 straight games with over 10.8 PPR points. That was his 4th double-digit PPR game this season. It's not just the short and intermediate. He's averaging 38.4 air yards per game, which is 86th percentile amongst qualifying tight ends. He's also getting 17.8% of the team targets. Outside of McLaurin and the running backs, I think Ertz might be the most valuable receiver on this team.
We'll do a couple more here. Hayden Hurst has missed 2 games. He was injured 3 games ago. I don't know how much time he's going to miss. But while he's been out, Will Dissly, 8 for 81 and 11. Yesterday, 5 for 41 and 7. Justin Herbert's had a 349-yard game, a 279-yard game. He's moving the ball. The ground game is sputtering. J.K. Dobbins has not been a 4-yard per carry runner in like any of the last 5 weeks. He's not sub 4 yards per carry. They're going to at some point have to lean on Herbert. Only if Hurst misses time, Dissly could be an emergency streamer. Anything there?
Yeah, I like Dissly a lot. I remember for a couple games in Seattle, he was like a touchdown machine, and I think injuries really derailed him. He's starting to carve out a role here, and I think he might be a better fit for this role than Hayden Hurst. He's had 18 total targets in the past 2 games. He's being used as a top weapon in this offense, and I think if you need a tight end, I don't know how long Hurst is out, but if we can clear weeks 9 and 10 and Dissly's still the guy from weeks 11 to 15, that might be the best tight end matchup schedule on paper.
Last tight end, and there's a reason behind it. It's not just a 70-yard game. It's like Mike Gesicki. I've noticed this. When T. Higgins misses, Gesicki is heavily involved. He went back to the beginning of the season. When Higgins was healthy, we didn't see anything from Gesicki. Higgins misses yesterday, 8 targets, 7 for 73. So weird enough, I know it's a tight end and it's a wide receiver, but it seems to me the way that offense functions, Gesicki is a pseudo replacement for Higgins. How crazy is that, Anthony?
I don't think it's crazy because we saw the involvement earlier this year. You know, the first 3 games, Gesicki had 4, 9, and 5 targets. We see Higgins come back. He's almost invisible. And then Higgins goes out again, right back to that heavy volume. And I think a lot of it is, yes, Gesicki's a tight end, but he plays that big slot. He's more of a big-bodied wide receiver to me than a tight end. And I think Joe Burrow knows he can lean on him. If you watch that game film from yesterday, he made some amazing catches, and he's done that all year.
Always been a great athlete, just hasn't had the opportunity to showcase it, right? Hey, if you enjoy videos like this, please consider hitting the like button and subscribe to the RotoWire Fantasy Football channel on YouTube. Also, you can check out all of our fantasy football content and rankings by getting a free 2-day trial. No credit card needed. Head on over to rotowire.com/Jim. You can check out all of our content. If you like what you see, join the team. If not, we're just happy you took a look and stopped by. All right, let's get to some reactions. We have 2 questions from Quincy. That's all we have. So we'll look at these real quick. Would you drop Algier for Rico Dowdle, I assume? His running backs are Kyron Williams, Tank Bigsby, Tyrone Tracy, Zach Moss, and Tyler Algier. Would you drop Algier for Rico Dowdle?
I mean, Rico does provide some value, especially when they use him in the passing game. But this Dallas backfield, they promoted Cook. They have Zeke involved. And they don't run the ball well at all. I would rather have Algier attached to that Atlanta offense. He does get some run behind Bijan Robinson, and this is a legitimate offense in Atlanta compared to whatever we're seeing in Dallas right now. And so look, I want Algier.
And look, running backs miss time. If Bijan Robinson misses time, we know the ceiling for Rico Dowdle. We've seen it. His ceiling is already there. That's not a ceiling. It's just meh. So if Algier walks into a starting role, because that passing game is humming, I'm with Anthony on that one. And then, all right, good. We got that. So we're all set. All right, let's get to our reactions. Reaction number one, the battle of the top 2 draft picks. We had Caleb Williams. We had Jaden Daniels. Big matchup between the Bears and Commanders. Ugly football game. Commanders win at 18-15. I guess we have to start by talking about the Hail Mary. I'm going to say this. For those of you, and I don't know a lot of kids soccer games, but I know what happens in a kids soccer game. When the ball goes here, everybody goes to the ball. The whole crowd goes. The Bears defense, it was a children's soccer game. The Bears defender saw the ball thrown short. They all ran to the ball. Nobody stayed with Noah Brown. Ball gets tipped, goes backwards. Easy touchdown. The Bears had no excuse. And I'm going to say one more bumble. The Bears got lucky because the Bears had the ball at the goal line in the middle of the 4th quarter. Finally get the ball. Their chance to take the lead. And what do? They hand the ball off. Great. But who do they hand it off to? A backup offensive lineman. A single running back was a backup lineman. Ball bounces off his chest in the handoff, goes right to the Commanders. Commanders take over the ball. Now the Bears get lucky. They get the ball back. They do score a touchdown and take the lead before the Hail Mary, in which it was a children's soccer play game. Anything about the bungles of the Bears before we talk about the game?
I mean, a lot of head scratchers here. I was a little bit higher on the Bears coming in, thinking, hey, this game yesterday between these 2 quarterbacks, like, it could mean a wild card spot for one of these teams. And I was assuming, okay, somebody in the North outside the Bears probably wins that division. Maybe Philly takes over in the East. And this is going to be playoff seeding, positioning. Maybe one gets in, one doesn't. Some of these mistakes by Chicago yesterday, and you brought up the lineman. I actually thought, because on the broadcast, they were talking like it was a defensive lineman, like they were trying to recreate the refrigerator Perry with that handoff, and it did not work. That was single-handedly one of the worst decisions I've seen. We got a lot of them. I don't know what Shane Waldron was thinking. I think what really crippled this offense, I get he hasn't been getting going, but when DJ Moore got knocked out, this offense did look a little bit different. Like they struggled to move a little bit more.
Yeah, it was not optimal. And well, let's go to the winning team. Let's talk about. I would say one more thing. What I want to say is this. I talk about this frequently. It's called the subliminal switch. And I learned it when I was young watching NBA. When a star player was out, you would see the superior team lose because you could tell they don't show up when like a superstar's out. I think the Bears didn't expect Jaden Daniels to play. And I could be wrong. This is narrative, and I'm not making excuses for him, but it's a subliminal switch. I don't think the Bears showed up. I think all week with this idea he's not playing, I think they in their back of their mind, they were facing a wounded opponent. That human nature thing, it just often can't be overcome. Your coach could tell you all week long, they're dangerous. He's going to play. They're dangerous. The Bears showed up as if they were not playing a dangerous team because the Bears had beaten some cake opponents. I'm not going to diminish that, but they look terrible. And I just always wonder, was their subliminal switch turned off here? And that could be it. So let's get to the Commanders. I had to rant on that for a minute. So Jaden Daniels, he gets him in the red zone frequently. They go with 4 field goals. It was Ertz drops a touchdown. Should have had that. The touchdown that Daniels had certainly was that Hail Mary, which again, the Bears, I don't even get defensively what they did, but Daniels gets done for fantasy. And I'm happy he did because I recommended to people, I said, if he plays, start him. So he gets 326 and a touchdown, runs for 52. It's about 25 fantasy points. So that puts him strong quarterback 1. Thoughts on Daniels? He gets his ribs wrapped up with ace bandage earlier in the game. What thoughts?
I mean, this guy's a legitimate football player. Like everybody talks about, these type of quarterbacks are a little bit more fragile. I mean, Jaden Daniels came back, and who knows, if it wasn't Carolina last week, there's a part of me that believes Jaden Daniels plays that game. And then to come back for this showing against a tough Chicago defense, and really take control of this game. Now, I get he only had that one touchdown. It was a Hail Mary, a little bit fluky, but he found a way to get the job done.
Mm-hmm.
And he's great in fantasy, right? Like from an NFL standpoint, I think he's going to have a great career. And I think they could potentially make a deep run. Maybe the Washington Commanders, they do the right thing and go get another wide receiver before the trade deadline. But he brings a high rushing floor and what he can do as a thrower. Like, people bring up the Lamar Jackson comp. I feel like Jaden Daniels is a much more polished thrower at this point of his career than Lamar Jackson was at his point of his career at this time, if that makes sense.
Terry McLaurin goes for $1.25. And I am not throwing any shade at Terry McLaurin. For 5 straight weeks or so, he has been a dynamic fantasy player. He's got borderline wide receiver 1. He's right there. Just doesn't get all the targets that some of these other guys get. But that said, again, the Bears have in some games traveled Jalen Johnson. They don't travel him here. There are times in McLaurin's time. I saw McLaurin get a couple of big catches against the secondary corner. Why? You're not worried about Olamide Zaccheaus. Certainly not worried about Noah Brown. God bless you for catching the Hail Mary, whatever. And Luke McCaffrey's not an issue. De'Ami Brown's not an issue. If you've done traveling the corner before, why would you not put Jalen Johnson on Terry McLaurin and make these other guys beat you? That's what I'll look. No shade on McLaurin. And you start him every week. You start him as a high-end wide receiver too, and there's no questions asked. But I don't get it, Anthony.
You bring this up. You bring up the muffed handoff. This was a winnable game. And a lot of teams make these mistakes and they're getting blown out. So I think if the Bears somehow they don't make the playoffs at the end of the year, they're going to go back to this game. And I think you're right. Maybe they did overlook Jaden Daniels playing. Maybe they're thinking that we're going to get Marcus Mariota. I don't, me all week when people were asking me, you think he's going to play? I was saying yes, because the magnitude of this game. So if they were believing he wasn't going to play, then I think they got to get their circuit straight in their mind, because I didn't think, if he had a pulse, he was playing in this game if he could. Other
side of the ball, DJ Moore is on pace for the worst season since his rookie year. And it might even be worse. He has 341 yards for 7 games. Now, the 17th game might cut him a break. But in 2022, he played 17 games, 888 yards. Right now, based on his numbers, he ain't hitting that. And this supposedly should be the best quarterback he's ever played with. With Justin Fields and Tyson Bagent last year, 1,364 yards and 8 touchdowns. Don't even get it. With bad quarterback playing Carolina, he had 3 of 4 years at least 1,157 yards. One bad season, 888 and 7. That was his worst. This is his rookie year. It's going to be worse. The last few games, we had that 105-yard game and 2 touchdowns game against Carolina. His other 3 of the last 4 games, 22 yards, 20 yards, and 27. I don't know what's going on here, but he is a far less effective player than he was in the beginning of the season, when at least he had a 53 and a 78-yard game. What is going on for DJ Moore? We'll deal specifically with Caleb Williams, but what's going on with DJ Moore?
Is it an injury thing? Is it a connection thing? You brought up he's had better season with other quarterbacks. Maybe the connection is off, because we are seeing some throws from Caleb Williams they're a little bit questionable. And it's not like Roma Dunze's pop. And you're like, all right, well, Roma Dunze's doing this and Keenan Allen's doing that. That's why we're not getting this elite production out of DJ Moore. These wide receivers aren't really getting going. Like, it's really been the DeAndre Swift show so far. So I think it's more of a Caleb Williams thing, because he's getting a lot of hype. He's making a lot of good decisions and developing as a passer, but it's not all there yet. Because if it was all there, you have these weapons. He's having a Jaden Daniels-like year statistically. It's just not happening yet.
And this was coming out of a bye. You would think, Waldron made some fixes like in week 3. You thought they might make some more fixes. Again, let's give this 1 week. But right now, DJ Moore may be a wide receiver 3. Maybe. Wide receiver with potential upside. That's what he is right now. 3 20-yard games in 4 games. It's very hard to make it better than that. Caleb Williams, he had 3 great games against soft opponents. Now, I'm going to give Dan Quinn some credit. Dan Quinn dialed one up here. Got a lot of simulated pressure. Williams was under a lot of pressure here. I would say it was almost 60% of the dropbacks he was under pressure. 10 for 24. 10 for 24. That's almost like Anthony Richardson. 131 yards. A lot of that was late. I want to say he was in the 60s going into the fourth quarter. It wasn't good. Runs for 41 yards, no touchdowns. It was a disaster. It was a complete disaster here. No pass catcher had more than 39 receiving yards because I was going to throw for 131 yards. There's nothing to go around. Is it, again, the Bears were looking past this team and Williams was maybe getting too confident in what had been happening, or is it just one of those days?
It could be one of those days. I don't want to discredit, Dan Quinn's a really good defensive coach. And I get they don't have the greatest personnel in Washington. But, if we remember what Dan Quinn did in Dallas, they have a few superstars. But when Trevon Diggs went down last year, Deron Bland, nobody even heard of him. I think he led the lead in interceptions he gets his defenses to play. And we're about the time of the year where defenses start to click. And Washington's defense is ascending right now. They're on their way up.
Reaction number 2, the Falcons topped the Bucs in a shootout, 31-26. I did not expect that Tampa Bay, without Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, will put up 26 points. We'll get to them in a minute. But Kirk Cousins does it again. Plays Tampa. First time it was 500 yards and 4 touchdowns. This time 276 and 4 touchdowns. Nobody's rostering Cousins is complaining about it. Big game for him. Realistically, what I saw was the problem. They won, but the problem was the coaching once they had a lead in the second half. I get the concept. Run the ball and end the game. Tampa Bay's run defense is good enough, and they were not getting it done on the ground in Atlanta. At some point, they could hammer them through the air all day long because pressure wasn't coming. No Jamel Dean. Their slot corner Tyke Smith was out. Just keep throwing the ball. Just keep throwing the ball. Because at some point, Algier 12 for 33, Bijan 13 for 63, decent. But they kept giving the ball back to the Bucs, and the Bucs kept coming back. So it was a problem. They win the game, so what? But the only player who doesn't really, the main player who didn't eat was Drake London, 4 for 36. Again, one of those games. 6 targets, he normally gets 12. Mooney goes off, 92 and a touchdown. Second game in a row, he blew up. And Kyle Pitts, and I got to find out why he only played 48% of the snaps. But he went off when he played early. I got to see what happened because normally he plays in the 70s. So I'm going to see if there was something I haven't heard yet anything, but that was an oddity. There must be something wrong there. But Pitt scores 2 touchdowns and 91 yards. So overall thoughts on Atlanta taking advantage of a wounded Bucs defense.
They did what they should have done. I wasn't expecting another 5 touchdown, 500-yard game, but we got 4 and 276 from Kirk Cousins. You can really abuse this Tampa Bay defense throwing the football, and that should be a tell for any team playing them moving forward. But I think you're right. There's a little bit more grit involved here with Baker Mayfield and what he managed to keep his team in it. Tampa, you don't run on this team well. And I did, 96 total yards between the two backs. I think you're right. If they just kept their foot on the gas and threw the football, I don't know if the game is this close.
Because they could have lost. There's a scenario they could have lost this game. And, wins are valuable in the NFL. And this was a big one because Mike Williams will be out a couple more weeks. This is for division supremacy. The Falcons win. They get it. Here's what I want to point out. And I did a video on buys and sells, and I really should have added Darnell Mooney as a sell. Here's why. In the last 5 games, we have 2 games. We have 105 and 2 touchdowns. We have 92 and 1 touchdown. They both came against Tampa.
Yeah.
But the last 3 games, 3 for 56, 3 for 38, 5 for 46. Those are good games. But people are going to remember these overall big numbers. And the fact that Mooney's season numbers are really blown up because of these 2 Tampa Bay games. I think people, and we loved Mooney going into the season.
Yeah.
But I think right now, you might be able to get more than Mooney's worth in trade because of the recent 2 big games against Tampa. Anything?
No, I agree. Now, if you need wide receiver help, he's not somebody I'm willing to move. But if you can get, this is one of those players you put a feeler out there. If somebody's willing to overpay, I can part ways with this guy. And I think you're right. When you see these 2 pop games, they forget the 2 single-digit PPR point games in between. They just see that 31 there and that 20, and you might be able to steal a team's wide receiver 1 while moving off a volatile wide receiver 2.
I mean, I'm thinking if the DJ Moore manager is really frustrated with the 320-yard games, I have to think that turns around. I have to think he's better than Darnell Mooney the rest of the way. Maybe he's not. But if you have the luxury to make that deal, and if Mooney may be on your bench, Mooney may not be your top 3 receivers. He may be on your fantasy bench.
Yep.
If he is, make a move for an underperforming high-end receiver. And if it works out for by the fantasy playoffs, you might really position yourself for something special. All right, Tampa Bay side of the ball. I'm going to give Liam Cohen so much credit here. He has been great all year. He didn't have Mike Evans. He didn't have Chris Godwin. Baker Mayfield throws for 320, 50 attempts to get there, couple picks, 3 touchdowns, runs for another 11 yards. I had moved Baker Mayfield from like a top 6 weekly quarterback. I moved him outside, moved him to like top 15. I just didn't think with this collection of characters, he'd get it done. And Cade Otton, 81 yards and 2 touchdowns. Insane. Totally crazy. He did. Now he's getting a lot of targets. And I think teams are going to start to say, oh, well, if this is what they're going to do, is the only guy until Evans comes back we got to worry about. I think teams might pay attention to Cade Otton. He's a good player, but he's not 81 yards and 2 touchdowns good. Give him credit. He had a great game. But thoughts on the Buccaneers in this one?
Overplayed my expectations. I was with you. I downgraded Baker Mayfield. I thought the matchup was good enough where Baker Mayfield was still startable in fantasy. But did I expect him to be able to keep this team in it when you're down 2 border? I don't want to say they're both all pros, but Evans is, and I would say Godwin at times plays like one. A lot of credit goes to Liam Cohen, and I get like a lot of people were worried about the Dave Canellis departure. People forget Dave or Baker and Liam Cohen were together with the Rams, I believe. I think this team could be dangerous if they can weather the storm until Mike Evans comes back. Now you bring up Cade Otton. This is now like you would think Atlanta, you say like, well, teams are going to figure it out. Well, Atlanta, the damage Cade Otton did last week to Baltimore and the fact that they didn't do more to take out Cade Otton this week, that's another head scratcher by the Atlanta Falcons and probably Raheem Morris.
There's no doubt.
8 for 100 against Baltimore after, and these receivers went down. Why wasn't there more attention? It's good for us as fantasy managers, but like from a football mindset, how do you let Cade Otton go 9 for 81 and 2 on you? He should have been the player you're trying to shut down.
There's no doubt. Now, I'm going to make another connection here. In the preseason, I talked about Liam Cohen, and I said we're expecting to bring some Sean McVay concepts in here, and he did. He clearly brought him in, and they've been very successful. Well, we've seen Sean McVay, even when Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp were out. We saw Tyler Johnson play well for a spell. We saw Jordan Whittington play well. We saw DeMarcus Robinson play great. Tutu Atwell. So is it possible that he can cobble together enough production? Not that they did it this week, but between McMillan, Trey Palmer, Raheem Jarrett, Sterling Shepard, is it possible he can cobble something together with Mayfield here enough to keep them afloat while Evans is out?
I mean, yes, but there's a yes, but the yes is, I think there's enough there. The yes, but you get KC next week, you got San Francisco, then you got your bye.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if KC loses another game this year. I'm just convinced that this team, they're just going to keep finding ways. And now Patrick Mahomes kind of looks like a quarterback again. And that was with DeAndre. We're not getting 2 catches, but that's enough about the Chiefs. San Francisco, I get they're getting CMC back. That team is flawed. That's a flawed team defensively.
It is.
So can Liam Cohen cook up enough offense to keep up with the San Francisco 49ers? That's the thing.
We've already seen the 49ers take teams lightly defensively, and they're not good, as you said. So there might be a little more than we think there. Anyway, reaction number 3. Are the Bills a Super Bowl contender? They win at Seattle 31-10. Now, we know the Chiefs, undefeated. We know the Ravens, they lost a divisional game. Hey, those AFC North games, are we going to talk about this? I don't think we're going to talk about it. I think I'm talking about yesterday's show. But those AFC North games, you're going to lose to some of your divisional opponents there. It's just the way that division is. I don't think that diminishes the Ravens at all. But are the Bills joining the party now? And here's the premise behind it. And I talked about this a little last week, but the minute they brought in Amari Cooper, defenses have to treat them very differently. I said it all off season. Teams are going to load up the short and intermediate area. There's nobody they're afraid of to win downfield. Dare Josh Allen to beat you. And realistically, the Bills were good, but they were struggling. They weren't able to put together explosive plays and drives. Even though Amari Cooper had only 2 targets yesterday, played half the snaps, we already see the field opening up. We see Shakir 100 yards on 10 targets. Keon Coleman, 70 yards and a touchdown. We see Kincaid, a touchdown. Dawson Knox, 50 yards. James Cook takes advantage of a bad Seattle defense, but again, there's no way they can stack the box. He goes for 133 all-purpose yards, 2 touchdowns. Are the Bills back?
I think so. And I think all it needed was a semblance of an alpha receiver. And I don't even know at this juncture if I can call Amari Cooper an alpha. But, it's crazy because now we're seeing Keon Coleman, and you said it, and Shakir, the back-to-back games have been, I think, their 2 most productive games of the year. And I think the immediate reaction is it's because Amari Cooper's on the field. Well, he's not really on the field a lot right now.
No.
So is it just Josh Allen playing with more confidence? I don't know.
It's game planning, Anthony, because even teams don't know how much Cooper is going to play, but you have to go with the game plan. The game plan before was nobody can beat us. There's not one guy on this team that can beat us. So you just pack it in and you take your chances. Josh Allen wasn't running for much. Not that he is now, but the passing lanes are far better than they were. It changes everything. When you have no alpha and you just got a bunch of guys, and Shakir's a nice player. We love Shakir, but realistically, it doesn't scare anybody. But now you just throw that one player in there and you got a game plan very differently. Those windows that were gone, they're there now. There are windows to throw in, and that makes all the difference. Anything else?
No, and you bring up Allen's rushing. He's not the same rushing player as we've seen in years past.
And we talked about that in the offseason. He had a lot of carries. We have seen mobile. Now, part of that was defenses defending. Again, I said they bring extra bodies up, and they did. Now, it's been different, but maybe now he doesn't have to run as much. Maybe now if these passing windows are there, maybe he won't have to play Superman as much. Now, he had Diggs before, so that should be, in theory, the same situation he has now. But again, we know running quarterbacks, that doesn't keep up forever. There are very few quarterbacks that maintain that in near 30, and he's getting close. He's at 28, I think. And so we were calling the fact that those running numbers may not be there the way they used to be. But again, it could be a number of factors. It's a long season. We got time to see if that changes, but we know Allen can get it done as a passer, which is a beautiful thing. Other side of the ball, Seattle Seahawks. I talked off season about college-only coaches coming to the NFL. Jimmy Johnson was successful for 1 year. Chip Kelly was for 1 year. He did it because he run that breakneck pace offense. But the problem with college coaches, don't count Jim Harbaugh's when he was an NFL player. He understood about making adjustments. He understood that. That was the problem. College coaches, your players are either wide open because your scheme is so good, or your players are better, and you put up these, and you roll your game plan out, there's no adjustments. Your guys are winning all day long in college. That's the end of it. NFL, that's the problem college coaches have when they come to run an offense. They come in, defensive coordinators are immediately, first half of the first game, they are making adjustments. And these college coaches have no experience in making real adjustments. That was the first problem we see with the Seahawks. They've got some garbage time yards. This week, no DK Metcalf. That was a crippler. Because, again, I go back to the same concept, the Amari Cooper for the Buffalo. With no DK Metcalf on the field, nobody's afraid of Tyler Lockett anymore. Was he 32? His best days are far gone. Smith and Jigba's an underneath guy. So what are defense going to do? Same thing. Pack it in. Kenneth Walker was benefiting greatly from the spacing that DK Metcalf provided because DK Metcalf is that player. You got to patrol the downfield area. Can't give up explosives in today's NFL. But if the explosive player is not there, you don't have to worry about it. Kenneth Walker, 9 carries, 12 yards. Now, he continues to get done for fantasy, 4 more catches for 33. He's had a ton of catches in the last 3 weeks. So even when he doesn't get it done as a runner, scoring touchdowns, he gets it done there. But Geno Smith, 212. There were a couple bungled plays. But all that said, no DK Metcalf, no coach who can make adjustments and figure things out. We saw the problems that could happen, that they're really dependent on Metcalf. Anthony?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I don't think Buffalo respected Geno Smith or this grub offense without DK Metcalf, because I watched a lot of this game. As we do, we both watch these games. They've had many goal line opportunities. They just stacked the box. I know Charbonnet fell in at the end of the game, but early in the game was when it was within reach. This is Kenneth Walker's money zone. The dude doesn't miss, and they stonewalled him play after play. Now, there were also some fluky plays. I think one snap went over Geno's head. Another one was botched. So these are just some mechanical issues as well that they have to correct. But Buffalo was, and normally you can run on Buffalo. Buffalo wasn't happening, and I think they were able to stack the box because there was no DK Metcalf. Hey, let JSN beat us. He hasn't beaten anybody yet.
No, that breakout didn't come. I was banking on the breakout.
Me too.
It didn't happen.
Me too. I thought I was smarter than everybody. I'm fading DK for JSN. I'm the smartest guy in the draft room.
Oh man, no, we weren't. We were not that. Oh man, at least it's not a total bust. At least he's like a wide receiver 3 at PPR league. So at least we got that. But no, we thought the breakout was coming in. No, didn't happen. All right, maybe there's next year. Let's do one more reaction. We kind of went a little long on time, so we're gonna chop it out. National Tight End Day is reaction number 4. So I don't know. George Kittle apparently is the origin of this National Tight End Day, and I think it had to be a thing, because I don't know if coaches decided to play along and get their tight ends involved. There were 17 tight end touchdowns in week 9. 8 tight ends had at least 75 yards. PPR points, 21 or more, 5 tight ends. Cade Otton, Kyle Pitts, Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Trey McBride. Now, usually 21 fantasy points, PPR, very few tight ends hit that number. That is not common at all. You can go down one. So we had 5 of 21. Let's go 14 and more. There were 12 tight ends with at least 14 PPR points. We see Laporta finally have his good game. 6 for 48 touchdown. He was the tight end 9 on the week. That's how good tight ends were. Last thing, we go down to 9 PPR points. Still for tight ends, that's pretty good. There were 21 tight ends with at least 9 PPR points. What went on yesterday?
I was thinking the same thing, because every other word, if you're watching Red Zone out of Scott Hanson's mouth, it's this guy scored a touchdown. Oh, the backup tight end in Detroit scoring a touchdown. This National Tight End Day. Like, I would hate in my logical mind think that these offensive coordinators are game planning for this. Because logically it doesn't make sense. But what other explanation is there? Because I know next year I'm going to be doing a very large round robin touchdown parlay with every tight end available at a sports book.
100% on that. And watch, just like our Jackson Smith and Jigba one will fall flat. But I thought the same thing. Round robin next year, tight end only, play it up. Take your chances, because if this is a real thing, I can't believe it is. Cannot believe it is. But it was.
By the time we got to Kittle at night, at that point, like I'm a unit better. I'm like, Kittle's getting in tonight. I think I went like 2 units on his anytime touchdowns. I'm like, there's no way it doesn't happen after today.
The funny thing was, Otten, okay, we knew he'd get targets. Nobody saw him being the top tight end in the day. I don't think anybody would have called that. If you did, great. You're very smart, and smarter than me for sure. Pitts scoring 2 touchdowns, that was an oddity. But the Kelce, Kittle, and McBride games, those games were all reasonable. We could all see those. Adam Troutman, 4 for 85 and a touchdown. That one was crazy. Njoku and Tucker Kraft, those were expected. Sam Laporta, this is like the first time he saw more than 4 targets, I think, all year. And he saw 6. It was a game when St. Brown saw 2 targets. 2 targets for St. Brown. So that was, and Jared Goff, did he even throw 15 passes yesterday? It was around 15.
That's his new thing every week. He throws like under 18 passes and completes almost all of them, and 300 yards. This is like a new thing for Jared Goff. But yeah, you're right. I don't think he completed that many, and he didn't have to.
Yeah, no. Jared Goff, 12 of 15, 3 touchdowns. Jared Goff, look, he's amazing. He's got to be a sell, right? He hasn't had more than 25 pass attempts in any of his last 5 games, yet he has multiple touchdowns in his last 5 games. I can't, maybe the efficiency can go for another 10 games. Maybe it could do that. Maybe it's possible. But talk about a sell high, because I don't think people are going to see his fantasy numbers. He threw for 85 yards yesterday, and he still had a good fantasy day because he got 12 points on passing touchdowns. If you could sell, I don't even know who you sell for. It's hard to trade quarterbacks.
Yeah.
But if there's something in a
Superflex.
package, Superflex, there's something in a package. I just find it very hard to think that you're going to throw 15 to 20 passes and continue to be a quarterback one. It hasn't happened before. And is Jared Goff really that guy that's going to do that for another 10 games? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I mean, the thing that I see, the schedule's fairly favorable between week 9 and like week 12. And then you hit fantasy playoff territory, like where games that matters. You see Chicago twice. You get San Francisco in a fantasy championship. You get Buffalo, whose defense I think is on a way up. Week 15. So just like that, the actual heart of the fantasy playoffs, weeks 15 to 17, Buffalo at Chicago, right? Home and away split. At the 49ers, home and away split, I would get off of them now just to avoid that, because you don't want to use this guy in the fantasy Super Bowl or the fantasy the console, whatever that is, like the week 16 to get in. And they're both away games. And we know Jared Goff's home and away split, they're historically not great.
Interesting. Again, it's hard to trade quarterbacks, and we hope Jared Goff keeps rolling. He's been so wonderful to watch. But again, that is just a ridiculously low amount of pass volume. Anyway, we were talking National Tight End Day. We want to thank all the tight ends out there that gave us a great fantasy enjoyment day. Hopefully you had one of those top performers in your lineup. Tucker Kraft continues to get it done despite seeing very low target volume, 3-4 targets, and the guy's getting double-digit points every week. That's another one. Very hard to explain, but hey, the offense is perfect for him. Athletic player, getting big plays, finding the end zone, outscoring the wide receivers that everybody touted. Kind of crazy. Any final thoughts on week 8 before we get out of here?
No, it was another crazy week in fantasy, and one game still to go. Looking forward to tonight to see if this Russell Wilson, George Pickens thing is real or not.
Remember to follow the RotoWire socials, because we have short videos going up all the time. TikTok, YouTube Shorts, the YouTube, depending where you're watching this, the RotoWire Fantasy Football own the YouTube page. You want to subscribe to that, like it, hit the subscription button. We got content coming out all the time. Live shows on Wednesday, a Sunday at the start sit stream. Anthony, anything else going on at RotoWire that you want to talk about?
No, check out if you're a sports bettor or using these, DFS apps. We have this picks and props tool. I use it myself. It gives you not only the more or less betting lean, you can break it down by sports book, and it also gives you the trajectory, like how a player fared against an opponent, how a player fared in the past 5 or 10 games. So this is a really powerful tool. And Jim, give them that link where they can try it for a few days free.
Yeah, go to rotowire.com/Jim. 2 days free access, no credit card needed. Check it out if you like us. Join the team. If not, we're just glad you took a look. For Anthony Cervino, I'm Jim Coventry. Everybody have a great rest of your day.